Hi, this is Alice Schutte, and I'm here to talk to you about the Gagne article in Conceptions of Giftedness. This is my concept video. The Conceptions of Giftedness is written by Robert Sternberg and Jana Davidson, as you well are aware. The article is titled From Gifts to Talents, the DMGT as a Developmental Model, and it is written by François Gagne, who spells his name in a very interesting way and whose last name means one in French. My initial reaction to this article was to be a little confused with all the letters that he had floating around. It reminded me a little bit of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and I had to read it through once or twice or three times before I could really gather the structure and the scaffolding which he had put in place in order to describe and categorize and quantify giftedness and talent, and how these things are related and the ways in which we can discuss them. DMGT stands for Differentiated Model of Giftedness and Talent. Gagne's initial idea is that in order for gifted students or adults to reach their full potential, they need to have several different aspects considered and differentiated. He constructs the model for GT into two concepts, one being giftedness and the other being talent. Giftedness with meaning aptitudes or natural abilities in the top 10%, and talent, which is skills and masteries of skills in the top 10%. And underneath this, he shares the two concepts share three characteristics, which is human ability, normative, and non-normal behavior. So all of these three characteristics help us identify who the gifted and who the talented are. Underneath this, he talks about four other components within the structure. He says that there are four catalysts, and the first one being intrapersonal, the second one environmental, the third one learning and practice, and the fourth one chance. When he discusses intrapersonal, he's talking about physical characteristics, motivation, volition, self-management, and personality, and he goes in a little bit more in depth in each of these categories within it to explain the aspects that this has an influencing giftedness or talent. And the environmental catalyst, that's kind of like the things that are beyond your control, the things outside of you which affect you, your milieu, which is your macro and microscopic influences, the people or persons in your life which influence you, the provisions, which is the enrichment, grouping, or acceleration that you are entitled, that you have access to, and also events that might create some kind of turbulence in your life, like loss or some kind of major transition. Learning and practice is really a catalyst about discipline and about developing your talent. First, you have to have the God-given talent, or you're born with it, and then you have to have the discipline in order to fine-tune it and crystallize it. You have to have learning and practice with the gift in order for it to come to fruition. And the last one he talks about is chance, and chance is actually connected to all three. The reasons why you are born the way you are, where you're born, or if you have discipline or not, is kind of outside of your realm of choice. And that has a major impact on if gifts or talents are cultivated. He talks about four aptitude domains, which is the way in which you can be gifted. He says you have the intellectual, the creative, the socio-affective, and the sensory motor. And he talks about how most gifted individuals in the top 10% are at least in two of these domains, if not more. He also discusses the G factor and IQ tests, and how the IQ tests are meant to ascertain whether you will do well academically. The G factor predicts whether or not you'll do well in university or in school. I have a problem with the G factor only in that if you are a child that has a learning difference, your G factor is not going to be is not going to be ascertained if you're taking a reading test, or if you have a processing issue and they're trying to figure out whether or not you have a language, if your language is okay. But anyway, the G factor overall is kind of like something that is a surprise. The developmental process for for gifted and talented evolution he talked about 4 different aspects. He talked about the maturation, which is just the genetic genome pool that you were born with. The informal learning, and that kind of is related to learning and practice, in which that you can teach yourself how to do something, or you can learn informally from someone else how to do something, especially if you have a gift for it and you can become good at it. You have formal non-institutional learning, which is kind of going back to apprentices or something like that, where you actually learn in an informal setting how to do something and you show a gift for it. And then you have the formal institutional learning, which is basically what our stereotypical idea of a gifted student is, like little man Tate, who knows everything and is highly precocious. And Gagne warns us that this is the stereotype, and that most gifted individuals are actually, only a very small percentage of the population is like that, and that most gifted people fall into another category. And finally, when he talks at the end, when he concludes, he tries to kind of do a little cheer for the DMGT and why it's good. And he explains that there's 4 different aspects in his conclusion that he believes makes it a viable theory for gifted and talent explanation. The first one being that you have the potentialities and the aptitudes are seen separately from the realization and the achievement, which means that you're looking at the gifts and you're looking at the environmental aspects in 2 different ways, so that you're not, you understand that they're codependent in a way. You can't really analyze one without the other. You can't put them in the same category or either, because they're different. The gift is kind of random as opposed to the environment, but they both impact each other. The identification also is looking at the gifts or talents in a way so that we're trying to take all the factors into consideration, and so therefore we can identify or help more early intervention with the gifted students so that they don't fall in between the cracks. The classification is when he's using all of his letters and he's getting into how different aspects are related to each other, and he says that his model works really well for understanding how to classify the gifted and talented. And then finally he says in his DMGT model, he does consider psychomotricity, which is not included in many other gifted and talented paradigms for explaining or identifying gifted students. And that is basically the gist of what I got from the article. So I will be trying to come up with some questions, and I will put those in my forum, and thank you for listening. All right, bye-bye.